Hi, I'm Jessie Heron, host of Rediscover Your Story, a podcast for marketers who need a break from everyday learning but still want to hear from like-minded professionals on all things creative. Today, we're here to talk with Cincinnati Cultural Ambassador Rico Grant. He demands excellence every day and thinks being disruptive is sexy. With that, let's rediscover his story. Rico, this is my first time getting to sit down with you, and I am so excited to talk with you and learn about you. I just mentioned to you off camera that Brendan Cole was here, and
Incredible
President of
guy.
Chamber, right? We all love Brendan.
Incredible.
So one thing I want to tell you that he said about you, and I'm not trying to embarrass you, I just want to tell you, he said that you are our cultural ambassador here in Cincinnati for the world.
Wow.
So now I'm really intrigued, right? Yeah. Like, I was excited to talk to you and learn about you, but now I really want to know, like, what does that mean to you? And I mean, how are you living up to this cultural ambassador? That's so cool.
Yeah, that means a lot, especially coming from Brendan, and who is a friend of mine first and foremost, but an advocate for all things cool. And that's how I refer to him, right? Risk taker, big idea guy, embracer of big ideas. So that means a lot to me, right? And I think there are several of us, right? I don't think it's just me doing that work. I think there are some incredible folks around this city and it's a community doing a variety of different things who are prepared to be ambassadors for this town and going to crush some things along the way. So I like that. I think that's awesome. Big title, lots of responsibility. But I live for creating cultural moments here at home. You know, I grew up on Vine Street. My grandmother's house is tattooed on my leg. So my meeting before this was with Emmy from Duke Energy, a friend of mine. And I was telling her about how when I was a kid, my grandmother, we used to ride the Metro. Pretty poor family, and I used to look out of those big windows in downtown Cincinnati, and never as a kid that I dreamed that I could be a part of that from an ownership standpoint.
Well, you have a big seat at the table here in Cincinnati.
Well, thank you. And I think it speaks volumes to our city and the development of our city that I can sit at those tables. And frankly, to be honest with you, now it's time to start passing out some plates, and that's what I live for. So thanks, Brendan. Love you.
Yeah, right. So when you say passing out some plates, do you mean that it's time for other people to have a seat at the table and take some ownership and bring their ideas to the table?
Totally. Yeah, my dad gave me that piece of advice, right? He said a while back, he said, you're in the rooms, you got a seat at the table. Perhaps it's time to start thinking about passing out some plates. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'll pair that with the quote that my grandmother, who I'll probably reference a lot throughout this conversation because she both meant a lot to me. She would say that windows only can open from one side. And what she meant was you have to be inside of the room in order to open up the window so that someone else can get through it. So that's exactly what that means. It means that representation has to be top of mind. It means that we need to start taking a look at non-conventional methods in regards to having a seat at the table and being in the room, because diversity in thought is an incredible way to grow, and probably the fastest way to grow. We can't hit what we can't see.
And I think diversity, too, in the sense of not only including other cultures, other races, other religious backgrounds, but also, too, like, you know, mixing young people
age groups
with old people, right? Like,
totally.
I cannot tell you how much I learn from people who are much older than I am. And I will say it took a lot of maturity for me to ask the questions of the older people and to not be like, I got this and bullish about it, but to actually ask the questions so that I could advance my career. It's a really hard ask to ask.
You know, our city is on the verge of a cultural renaissance. And more specifically, I'll be honest, a Black cultural renaissance. If we capture this, we can, 100 years from now, we'll be able to compare ourselves to what happened with the Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s, right? One of the ways that we're going to get there is by embracing young and new ideas, right? I'm 38 years old, not an old guy, but certainly not a young guy. And one of the things, my fraternity brothers called me a mid-head. Not old head, not young guy, but mid-head. I'm like, all right, as long as I can stay there for another decade or so, I'm okay.
We're getting older quicker, by the way.
Absolutely.
Why does it happen so quick?
I know, but one of the things that I try to do constantly is just listen to this younger generation. They're better, in my personal opinion. They're faster, they're smarter. I mean, you got to think about it now. I think it's 24, 25-year-olds grew up with an iPhone in their hand. That's wild, right? I still remember my flip phone. I was
playing
looking
Snake.
through exactly,
Yeah,
playing
the
Snake.
Nokia.
So embracing that is going to be key, not just for the city of Cincinnati, for the world. Other cities are mimicking this and doing it really, really well. Nashville being one of those cities, right? Detroit, how people are just moving to Detroit now is unbelievable because it's evolving and it's changing. And I'm looking forward to doing the same thing, being on the verge of being a part of the group to do the same thing here in our city. Yeah.
How do you keep a pulse on everything? I mean, you're 38 years old. I got to tell you, I knew of you because of Scott. We sat at the same table.
Shout out to Scott.
Yeah, shout out to Scott, owner of Resolve. We sat at the same table when we were planning for Blink because Resolve captures Blink content. And I wasn't really clear on what you did. And then I looked you up, right? And I was like, holy shit. Yeah. Rico Grant has his thumbprint or fingerprints on a lot of different initiatives in a really great way in Cincinnati. Yeah. How do you keep your pulse on everything? How do you keep all the plates spinning?
Yeah. We were talking before we started filming today, and we were talking about different podcasts that we listen to. And there's a podcast that I listen to called Earn Your Leisure. Really reputable podcast. There's a guest, his name is Larry Moreau, New Orleans guy. 32 years old, 33 years old, owns 5 restaurants in New Orleans and 1 nightclub. He's crushing it, right? And black guy, right? And I had a chance to interact with him at Essence Fest in New Orleans a few weeks back. Not for long, but just enough to let him know that I appreciated him and I thought what he was doing was awesome. And when I'm listening to the podcast, he says this. He says that sometimes his friends ask him, you're opening a new restaurant, you're opening a new nightclub. Why? How? This industry is so stressful, and it's almost like you welcoming being stressed. And what he says is, I'm not stressed, right? I love it. That's how I'm able to keep going. I really love what it is that I do. I love the people that I work with, and I love everything wrapped around what we have going on, and I don't see that burning out anytime soon. I wake up overjoyed with the fact that I have 9 meetings today, right? But 9 meetings that are going to help push the town forward, the city forward, and hopefully the world, right? And inspire some people along the way and be inspired. So passion takes me through a lot, and that really matters to me. So that's how I stay connected.
I got to tell you, first of all, I was getting a little emotional hearing you say that. I mean, I think that for me, I love what I do. Yeah. I mean, I get to work in a really cool industry, but I wouldn't say that I'm doing enough, right? And so, again, I look at things that you do, and I'm like, oh, my gosh, here I am. I'm 41. Ugh. Yeah. Anyway.
You look amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Not as great eyelashes as you. Again, you're flexing on me with that. But, I will say that I don't think I do enough. And when I try to take more onto my plate, I always feel like some other plate is spinning, right? I'm constantly spinning all these plates. Yeah. But I'd love to learn from you because I just feel like There's
a difference between the two of us, though. And I value that difference. And the reality is that you're raising children, right? And a part of that is doing a lot because the same values that you have, the way you see the world in a very delightful way, just by conversation with you, I know that if you're raising your children that way, then we have an opportunity to have an offspring into this world that's going to see the world that way and be inclusive and forward thinking.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best job in the world, is the parenting aspect, right? I do that a lot with my nieces and nephews. I don't have children, but I constantly try to remind them of, without taking away from their own thought leadership and their own views and personality, but sharing with them that we got to inject love into the world, right? And that really, really matters. So I'd say you're doing quite a bit.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate
absolutely.
it. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about your family. Like, you have nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
You're obviously very close with your grandma.
Yeah,
which is
both
cool.
grandmothers. Both grandmothers I was extremely close with, and my mom and dad as well. We just celebrated together as a family at the Cincinnati Music Festival a few weeks ago. My friend Fran Santangelo hooks us up. I'm able to take partners up there, but also add my family to the mix. And you know, my parents is where it all started, right? For me, very close friends, separated when I was incredibly young, but maintained a relationship that was very fruitful to my childhood. Sure, we had our ups and downs just like any other family, right, and so forth. But the reality is that they always loved me. They always cared for me. They put me in positions to win when they could. And that meant the world to me. And I just try to pay it forward through my nieces and nephews now, and also my parents, and showing them, exposing them to some of the, you know, things that we've been able to obtain, some of the resources that we've been able to obtain through the work that we do. So it's really awesome. But yeah.
I mean, they had to instill something with you that kind of drove you to this love of like art and entrepreneurship, and right? I mean, where does that come from? Yeah,
so my father, I didn't realize that my father was an entrepreneur until well in my 20s. He's a drywall master, right? Just an incredible guy. I mean,
that's an art.
It is an art.
That is more than a skill. That is an art.
It is an art. It is an art. I mean, it's a common joke in the neighborhood that I grew up in, South Avondale, that, you know, his son can't hang drywall, right? Because my father is a drywall master. It wasn't until a summer in college where I needed to make some extra money, and I called my dad and I said, hey, you got anything that I can do, right, outside of the skill set? And he said, well, lucky you, today is demolition day. So come by, I can use a couple extra hands, bring your friends, bring your frat brothers, and we got to demo this house to get prepared to hang up new walls, new drywall. So we went there, and I'm expecting to do this job with my father. And I realized that he wasn't lifting a finger, right? And I said, well, wait a second, what's going on here? And even though it was a small operation and his business is very small, you know, that's when I began to realize that perhaps maybe this entrepreneurial thing is in my bloodline, right? I've been on job sites with him before, but never cared enough to pay attention. Now I'm paying attention, and that was a very valuable lesson to me, right? Pairing that with my mother's level of organization. She is a master organizer. She doesn't do it for a living, but my mother still keeps a ledger. Every dime she spends, she knows to the cent. And probably
nobody
some of that,
does that these
days,
right?
Totally. And probably some of that came from hardships throughout life, right? And making sure that she could provide for her children and so forth. And I'm her oldest, so I had the first row seat at watching her really roll out this level of organization. Pairing those two things from a pedigree standpoint, along with just my professional and corporate career, injecting that into entrepreneurship and creativity has been quite a benefit. So I'm very grateful for the foundation.
Yeah. No, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And I have to say too that, you know, when I think about just like that foundation that you have, and then where you kind of are, you know, pulling the strings to pull all these different organizations together, and the cultural ambassador kind of role that Brendan gave you, you know, I can kind of see how it all comes together to be the Rico's, your world. It's your world. I mean, who would have ever thought of a barbershop with an art gallery tied together? I mean, those two things in my mind just don't naturally pair together, right? Like, you just don't think of that as a pairing. Where did that come from? What was like the thought process behind that? And
but they do. So I grew up, my father's friend Marvin had a barbershop 200 feet away from my grandmother's house. It was called Ebony Clippers. It's set on the corner of Vine and Forest, right by the Cincinnati Zoo. Okay. And I grew up in that shop. I swept the hair off the floor in that shop. I got my hair cut there.
You've been around entrepreneurs your whole life.
Totally. And I would
really
soak
have.
that energy up.
Yeah.
But the things that I loved about that institution were the conversations that took place, right? And it was radically transparent, yet respectful arguments constantly, whether it was about sports, whether it was about politics, whether it was about the state of the city, it didn't matter. But one thing that I loved about that environment was that it was uniform and those guys were together, right? Now, when you sat there as a kid and you looked around the shop, there was art. It just wasn't by local artists, but it was a Dr. King painting that Marvin might have bought from Target or at the time whatever store was popping at that time, and the walls were decorated in that, right? So I've always dreamt of a place similar to that, but on my expansion where we can create a conversation vessel. People walk into a gallery at Gumbo and you don't feel a barbershop and you don't feel an art gallery. You feel a vessel that is totally appropriate to have incredible conversations, right? Art leads conversations. It is a driving force of conversation and disagreements and agreements. And if you create an environment like that isn't just for African-American men, like the shop that I grew up in, but for me, for you, for Charlie, for Scott, I think what it allows is diversity in thought. And that's what we try to do, was just get these different perspectives. And that's why we call it Gallery at Gumbo. Gallery from the art on the walls to the creatives behind the chair, making us all look halfway decent. And Gumbo just speaks of this inclusive factor, right? When you're making gumbo, you're not thinking about what herbs and spices. It's a combination of everything. And it always comes out really consistent and really good.
Really, really good, yeah.
So that's why we did that.
It's like this healthy tension too, right?
Oh my goodness.
I told you a little bit about me, how I'm a direct communicator, but I really love healthy tension. I think it helps to propel everybody forward a little bit more.
It does.
I don't know how you feel about this, but when you're in a creative space and you have conversations, creativity is so subjective. There's no objectivity in it. So you have to have these conversations to kind of see everybody's perceptions and perspectives. And I love that. So we're fans of Gumbo Talks. We're big fans.
The least expensive way to travel the world is to talk to somebody who doesn't think like you.
Interesting. Look at all these little nuggets.
Literally. I mean, think about that,
Yeah.
right? The least expensive way to travel the world is to have a conversation with someone who doesn't think like you. Someone from a different continent, someone from a different country, a different neighborhood, went to a different school, public school, private school. You know, my conversation most recently a few weeks ago was with some friends in New Orleans, and we were talking about boarding school versus just regular school. I didn't know anyone who went to boarding school, but there's a guy at the table who went to boarding school providing that perspective. It sounded crazy to everyone at the table until he opened his mouth.
And then you were like,
yeah,
interesting
because
concept.
after boarding school came Harvard School and so forth. And, you know, he's a multimillionaire finance guy doing incredible work. Something worked.
Yeah. I'm laughing because, we were at the pool this weekend and I'm friends with a woman, my best friend Lauren. She has two sons, and the one son came up to her like, when are you sending Tyler to boarding school? And she
It's
was
a
like,
joke.
It's
serious.
As a joke, but now, I mean, I'm like, hey, Lauren.
Why not?
Might want to consider it. But actually, her answer was spot on. She goes, you know what? I'll consider it. I'll think about it.
Sure.
I'll let you know.
Sure.
I mean, but I've never met anybody. I mean, you hear about it like Harry Potter. I don't know, but like I've never met anybody.
Exposure is key.
Yeah.
Right? And so, yeah, I love having conversations with people who just don't think like me, respecting their opinions. You don't always have to agree, and that's perfectly fine, but respecting their opinions, their viewpoints, their thoughts, and then learning from it gives you something to think about.
Is that why you started your podcast, Gumbo Talks?
Yeah, totally. Diversity in thought is always my goal. So my goal of Gumbo Talks was to create an environment where individuals sat down with each other who normally wouldn't have the opportunity to, for various reasons, whether that's busy schedules, whether that's exposure to the other individual. So, we always sit down a high-power CEO. So we've had David Taylor, former CEO of Procter & Gamble, Rodney McMullen, CEO of Kroger. We've had Mayor Aftab. And we've had these individuals sit down and have real conversations with guys like me and a creative and an artist and an athlete, a photographer. Those things matter, right? And we get some uniformity revolved around a conversation. And it's not always the most serious of topics.
Sure, I've heard some of the topics are fun.
We crack up, we have a good time. We talk about difference in opinions on artists and sports and politics and everything. But again, it's diversity in thought. Who wants to have a conversation with someone who just thinks exactly like you?
Right.
Not a very entertaining conversation, not very insightful, and it's hard to learn from that, right? So that's why we started it.
So I feel like this about myself, but I'm wondering, are you a naturally curious person?
Oh, incredibly curious. I'm a why guy.
Got it.
I have to know why.
Got
right?
it. Were you that kid, like when your parents told you something? Why?
Super hesitant.
Why?
Super hesitant. Friends, family, anyone, classmate. Why are we doing this again?
Right.
And
were you the kid in class that always raised their hand?
You know what? I was kind of, school was weird for me. I went to I was just having a conversation this morning with a friend of mine. I went to 11 schools in 3 cities before the 7th grade.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Why?
Toledo, Columbus, Ohio, and Cincinnati, obviously. And I didn't really settle down in my school world until about the 7th or 8th grade, and the consistent schools from that point. But up until that point, it was kind of hard for me to make friends. Luckily, I have a large family. My cousins and my siblings were really, really close in that nature. So I always had substance in regards to friendship through family, but classmates being friends. I was jumping around schools and cities. My mom was moving for work and things along those lines. So I didn't have that capability. So I was always a pretty shy guy up until about the 7th or 8th grade, when I really settled down into my comfort zone. But yeah, the why question is something that I've been asking since I was a kid, and I still ask to this day. Yep.
Do you feel satisfied, or are you constantly like unsatisfied? I think that's a general question, not just to your why, but I'm really curious, right? I'm just curious about your DNA here.
Yeah. Satisfaction is a weird term for me. I'm fulfilled.
Great,
right?
I love that. Yeah.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
Love the work that I do. Go to sleep knowing at night that we're making an impact and that we're giving an opportunity for other people to whether interact with our activations, work for our company, whatever that may be.
Sure.
Right? Satisfaction is going to be a tough one for me because I love to win, right? And I see failure in every trophy, every article that's written, every accolade that we're giving. And I do say we because there's an army of a team that makes all this work. I see deficiencies in every single part of that. I'm the guy at Juneteenth Block Party with 15,000 people in the audience. We grew that thing from 400 to 15,000 in 4 years. I'm the guy who literally can see that light is off on the stage.
Wow.
Right?
So are you a perfectionist?
It's weird. Yes, to an extent. I've learned to be able to let go of that a little bit.
Okay.
I've learned to be okay with the minimum valuable product. It's very, very important to me.
Yeah.
Because I've learned that if I try to perfect things, I will never release anything to the world.
So that's more about being agile. So you're trying to be agile
very
in your
much
approach.
So.
Okay. Yeah.
Nimbleness is important to me as well, right?
Yeah.
And understanding that everything won't fire on all cylinders at all times. However, if I paid for that light to be on, I need that light to be on, right? Or if that was the vision, I need for that light to be on. And that matters to me, you know?
Well, I think vision matters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to paint your picture here, but in my mind, I'm thinking about like you have a vision.
Yeah.
You have a vision for Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. You have a vision for our vibrant city. And it's almost like everything else is in black and white and your vision is full vibrant color and you can see all the details.
Yeah.
Right? Like, is that even remotely accurate?
Yeah, well, it is, you know, and I said this before, you know, your vision is directly tied to your focus.
Yes.
Right? Dramatically tied to your focus. So take a scenario where you go to the eye doctor and they say, hey, where's your vision stand, right? Or what's your prescription, rather? It can change, right? You get older, you've had obstructions to your vision, whatever the case may be. But the actual thing that you want to do, the actual thing that you want to accomplish is dramatically dictated by your focus. And I use this example all the times, right? When you go to the Derby or you go down to Keeneland, when you watch those horses race, they've got blinders on each side of their face, right? And for a minute and a half, while that race is being ran, they have to eliminate every surrounding factor around them in order to complete the job, in order to complete the race. I am that way. And I've embraced that. And I have to learn to pay attention to my own intuition. I have to build up my own self-confidence. And I've got to really focus on the controllables so that I can finish that race. I am exactly that way with every day, every project, every task, because they all matter.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I think too, like, it's incredible that you know that about yourself. Like, you feel so incredibly focused on the things that you want to accomplish.
Yeah.
And that's amazing to me. I think that when I was even in my mid 30s, and I know you heard this when we were talking to Chef Ken, but I had an incredible sense of imposter syndrome. Like, I felt like I knew that I was good at things, but then someone else would do it. I'm like, oh, maybe they're better. And I think that as I sort of matured in my thought process, I think I just kind of felt like, yeah, maybe they were better at it, and I need to learn from that, so that I could keep learning and keep moving and keep growing. But I love that you already feel that, and that you know that you have to continue to, like, go with your intuition and follow your gut. And
transparently, where my deficiency is, and I'll be open with you about this. I often ask myself, why me? Right? I have that sort of syndrome, whatever that is, right? I grew up amongst friends who couldn't fathom the things that we're doing now, right? I grew up in an environment that most people would count you out just because of the environment that you grew up in, right? They would think, well,
what does he know? Or?
What exactly?
Yeah.
So every milestone in my life, from graduating high school to going to college to getting my first corporate job to becoming an entrepreneur and the hardships of that early on, to now having a decent amount of success to be able to, do some really cool things. I've always dealt with this why me effect, especially when I look back, and I still got childhood friends that, are my biggest cheerleaders, who are so happy for my success, but may not be living in the fulfilled life that I am, right? And walking in that purpose. But I often deal with that. I often deal with, how the hell did I get here?
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And do I belong in this room? Right?
I think you do, friend.
Yeah, well,
I
thank
do.
you.
No, I
Thank
think you do. And is it a why me from, like, a embarrassment perspective, or is it amongst your friends, or is it a why me, like, why was I the one that is supposed to be carrying this stick and leading this charge?
Yeah.
And this is a lot, right?
I think it's just, to quote my grandmother, she would say, and she was a very spiritual woman, she said, you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I think that's, as I get, and again, not an old guy, but not a young guy, but I have found myself to be a bit more spiritual in my adult years, right? As I get closer to becoming an old guy, I realize that my spirituality is really, really important, and being connected to that and rooted to that is important. So I have to sort of give it away to the higher power of who I believe in, and really understand that I'm supposed to be here, but it is a constant daily struggle. When I look around a room and I see folks who 5 years ago I aspired to be like, and still do to this day, right? But I'm sitting next to them and they like me, and they like the things that I'm doing. It is a very tricky scenario for me when I look at my day and I see the board meetings and the commercial opportunities that are coming my way, and the speaking engagements. That's always a tricky one. Like, why do people want to hear from me? And I struggle with that, transparently, and it's becoming easier, but obviously we're not all perfect, right? We don't think perfectly. We don't, and you shouldn't be too high. You shouldn't be too highly on yourself. Right. You should kind of have that mindset a little bit. And I'm trying to alleviate it as much as possible, but I do on the daily. Yeah. Like, man, this is incredible. How the hell did I get here?
Right? I think like, why not? Why not you?
Exactly.
Honestly.
Exactly.
And, you've got those big shoulders. So you can carry a lot of weight on your shoulders. You can really bring people along. And the other thing too is I think that's the cool part about our city and our region is that people like Brendan, for example, he wants to hear from young people. He wants to hear from people who have diverse backgrounds. Jill, same way. I think about Jill Meyer. Love Jill Meyer. I mean, she's such, again, as a woman, looking up to other women is hard because sometimes they stomp on you as they go past you. And I'm like, oh, hey, are you going to lift when you climb? No, cool. Okay. I'll take your heel in my face. Right. I mean, that happens. Yeah. And so I look to people like her and how she embraces like the young people to really, do this great merge with everybody else in the city.
Totally.
And I think that's awesome.
Totally.
I think it's so cool. I mean, again, thinking about the table we were at, talking about Blink.
Yeah.
All these young people, diverse
Shout
backgrounds.
out to Blink, right?
Shout out to Blink. Incredible. I mean, it was a blend of partnerships. It wasn't just Resolve as the video company. There were multiple video content companies at the table. That's so cool. That's so cool.
I think we have a slate of incredible change agents who are incredibly smart in our city. And I'm sure other places have that, but I think it's unique to Cincinnati. Jill Meyer is the smartest human I've ever met in my entire life. It's almost like she knows what's going to happen next. I mean, obviously she's a trained litigator and has that, but
smart.
Oh my goodness.
Gorgeous.
I've called Jill with what I thought were crisis moments.
And she answers the phone.
Literally. And we'll set time aside or reschedule a meeting to spend time with you. That matters. Brendan's the same way. He's going to crush it in that role, obviously, as the president of the chamber. But there's a lot of that, right? And I've been fortunate to be able to tap into that. And
but that's the key right there. You tapped into that too, right? Yeah. Like that's something that I feel like hopefully this podcast, this episode in particular, I hope gives someone who is our age or younger. Yeah. Don't care the background. Don't care what industry you feel like you're coming up through. But like tap into those resources. You look at the Cincinnati Chamber and you think, is that really a resource I can tap into? Or those people that I can talk to? Yeah. They're so approachable.
They are.
Right?
Dramatically.
Get in there.
It's powerful what you said. If I could, I would give myself 2 pieces of advice.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah, I would give myself 2 pieces of advice 10 years ago if I knew what I knew now.
Okay, so 28-year-old.
28-year-old
Rico.
Yeah. The first piece of advice I would give myself is that, and I don't even know if it's advice, it's more insight, is it's going to be all right. Right?
Yeah.
I say that to say that you don't have to have it all figured out right now. Now, 10 years later, I don't have it all figured out right now.
That's okay, though.
But it's all right. Right? The other thing that I would say is that being disruptive is sexy.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It really is.
Yes.
And when there's not a door, there's a window. Right? And you have to find organic, unique, professional ways to assert yourself in a way that's going to allow for you to grow. Sometimes that's, it's funny. I'll tell you how I got in touch with David Taylor. I shared this on the podcast. I met him at an event for Big Brothers Big Sisters. I met him at Big Breakfast, and I was emceeing for that group, Kathy, and the wonderful work that they're doing, Mike Rodarte, and just shout out to the Big Brothers Big Sisters group. They're incredible. And they asked me, they gave me the platform to MC this conversation between Rodney and David. And I had already had Rodney's information. We had talked.
He's
and
a cool guy too, isn't
I
he?
wanted to invite them on the show.
Yeah.
And what I did was, I didn't have David's information. He was never on any of the invites. So what I did was I sent an email to 30 different variations of David Taylor at png.com.
Hey.
That's what I did. And within an hour, I got a reply. And
from the right one?
From the right one. From the right one. From the right one.
Please stand
From
up.
the right one. And that was me being gritty. That was me taking my time. But I was very proud of doing that foundational work, right? And putting that work in to get that done. And it ultimately came on the show, ended up being a big supporter of ours. And Procter & Gamble is still a supporter of the work that we do, just incredible work that they do in the community, along with some of our other business partners. But
it started the conversation.
that level of disruption, right?
Yeah.
And that level of risk-taking and taking the time to do that. It took time, right?
Yeah.
To find 30 different variations of it is kind of tricky.
That is
right?
tricky.
But
and how long ago was that? Were we talking a couple years ago?
that was 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay.
It was roughly 2 years ago, right?
Pre-AI, because you could have probably done
Pre-AI,
that real quick.
yeah, pre-AI. And I don't know how to work AI now, so I don't even know. I would still have to probably do it the same way. But incredibly, and you know, that's the work that it takes. And I think that if I can give myself the advice, that would be a part of the advice is, you know, being disruptive, taking chances, betting on yourself, doing things in a non-conventional way. Sexy, and it can pay off. Not all the time, right?
Sure.
But it can pay off, and it can get you to your next step.
But I think, again, being 38, you're still young and you can take those
Yeah.
risks, right?
Yeah,
Those
totally.
risks are totally viable for you to take. I
Absolutely.
mean, that's perfect.
Yeah.
So you have advice for younger self. What about for 10 years down the road self? What would you tell that Rico?
Yeah.
Or what do you think that Rico is going to be doing?
Yeah. He'll be working. I don't. My father and both my parents work. Right. My father promised he would retire last year. Hasn't mentioned it since.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I think is really powerful for me 10 years from now is, you know, relaxation is going to be really, really important.
Okay.
Right. I have sprinted the past 6 years. Since 2017, leaving my corporate job to now has been a full-blown sprint. And the pandemic only sped that up for me. I never stopped. Gallery at Gumbo, Black and Brown Faces, Juneteenth Block Party, Cinema, 17 Under 17, Gumbo Talks, all created from March 2020 to now.
So that's not the 6 years. Those are 3
The
and a half years.
The pandemic put me in a very childlike imagination atmosphere where there were days where I just felt like I was floating on ideas and concepts.
So for you, pandemic was okay?
Pandemic was half the things that we're sitting here talking about wouldn't exist without it. It was a weird time for me, but what it did was, and this ties to your original question, it forced me to sit my ass down.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And really think about what the future looks like for me. And I say that because to your original question, what does 10 years look like? The next 2 years looks like sit down, evaluate where we are, focus on scalability so that 10 years is very pleasant.
Right.
Right?
Right. So you still want explosive growth, but you
Totally.
want to do it strategically.
Totally.
Smart, intentional.
Yeah, we have to stop building new things, right? And really focus on the impact of the things that we've already created and already built and finding ways to scale those things. Like I have a new nightclub opening in less than 3 months.
We heard.
Right? And beautiful place, beautiful space. It's going to serve the city well. I think we'll be successful. But the reality is that we've got to draw the line somewhere. One of the things that I'm doing that is tricky is all of my concepts are different.
Right.
Right? I'm not franchising a cinema. I'm not franchising a gallery at Gumbo. They all are unique and different, and it's only one of them.
Right.
Handcrafted. Yeah, handcrafted.
Boutique.
So that's tricky because you can't just swap out the systems for each one.
But there's you're the consistency. Your team's
Very
the
true.
consistency. So you can still create bespoke experiences and environments.
Very true.
But you have a focus.
Yep.
I'm gonna remind you the things you said, right?
Thanks,
like I'm gonna be your friend, and I'm gonna force
appreciate
friend
that.
you. I'm gonna force friend you because I'm gonna keep you on track. I'm gonna say, hey, remember, you've got focus. It's you. It's your team, and you can be strategic.
Yep. And also, thank you. And that is the case, and we will do those things. The caveat to that is I'm only interested in excellence.
Yeah. And you're only one person.
That's it. I'm only interested in excellence. You should, our team, we go at it.
Yeah.
Right? In a very positive, family-oriented way, but we are not willing or allowing ball dropping in any way, shape, or form. So excellence is the key. And when you put that on your shoulders,
that's a lot.
It's a lot.
It gets intense.
It's a lot. So we're getting there. We're figuring it out. Everything's working right now. And we're excited about the future, what the future looks like. But 10 years down the road, I'd like to relax a little bit.
So you need proteges. You need to get that team, like you said, you got that team.
Yeah.
You need to shape them the way that they need to be so that they also have that ringing the excellence bell every day, and then you can relax.
Totally. I was listening to this theory that Netflix has, that one good employee is worth 2 mediocre employees, right? And I try to bet on the winners, right? And I have a team that is just world class. Because they're in Cincinnati, Ohio, doesn't matter.
Right.
They are world class,
right.
And we are doing that. We're growing people up within the organization, allowing them to grow and blossom into roles that are more executive.
Yeah.
And that's exciting for us. It comes with a different level of responsibility, comes with a different, pay grade, but it's worth it. So I'm really focusing on that, auditing myself and the team to make sure that we're firing on all cylinders and that we're bringing the right people in and keeping the right people in place.
And having that culture that supports.
Too important.
Oh my gosh. Culture is so important. If you bring in one person who disrupts the culture, that can be catastrophic to a company, especially a small company. I don't know how big you are.
Yeah.
We're 9 people.
Yeah.
And plus some interns, which are, again, they have a seat at the table. When we meet on Monday mornings, they're there. We want to know their ideas.
Yeah, we're at about 30 collectively between all the organizations.
That's amazing, yeah.
My favorite thing to hear, though, I've got 2 members of my team, Jayla Stallworth, who is my executive assistant.
Yes, emailed with her.
Yeah. And Raven Fulton, who is co-chair of Black and Brown Faces and Juneteenth Block Party for Paloozanoire. They call me Brother Boss. And I love that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And when they text me happy birthday, hey, happy birthday, Brother Boss. And that means the world to me because that means we have the perfect balance of professionalism and the personal line where they're able to call me about a family issue or call me if they have a flat tire on 75, but also call me about an invoice. Yeah. And I love that.
Yeah. And to as an entrepreneur, you probably want to have other entrepreneurs within your business because then they're thinking like an entrepreneur. They're not willy-nilly spending. They're, even silly things, but just turning off the lights when you're done or putting things away.
I say it all the time.
Yeah.
I don't want you working for me forever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Go do something absolutely incredible.
Right.
Right? And allow me to be able to support that.
Would that be the biggest compliment, you think?
I think so.
Yeah.
That's a huge compliment, right? When someone is inspired by or using a skill set that they learn by working on several of your initiatives or organizations or companies.
Yeah. You almost want them to outgrow you.
Totally.
And to take it's almost like they're a branch off the tree. Right?
That's the key.
Go do it.
That's how we push our city forward. That's how we grow, and that's how we develop talent here. It's also how we retain. And I know Brendan talked about this a little bit.
He did talk about that a little bit.
This is also how we retain, right? Is by resourcing this next wave of doers.
Yes.
That's why Fund Noir exists, the fund that we created to help Black-owned businesses grow and scale and start in the city of Cincinnati. And we got the business community behind it. Kroger, First Financial Bank, Sycamore Capital, they all put money into this fund so that we can provide non-diluted capital to small businesses to help them grow and scale. You know, the crazy part about it is that if every small Black-owned business around the country was able to hire 1 or 2 employees, we would shave unemployment rates dramatically, right? So we've got a resource, and that's going to help us retain some talent and then grow as a city as well. Yeah.
What are you most proud of?
Well, that's a tricky one.
I know. I have 2 tricky questions.
Yeah.
That's tricky question number 1.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Transparent moment. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Most proud is being able to provide a job to a sibling of mine who was formerly incarcerated. That is, I never thought that would be in the playbook. But being able to take a brother that I love who was incarcerated for a very long time for a nonviolent crime, right? We know what prison reform is and how the emergency state of the justice system, where that stands, right? Who was over-sentenced, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
To be able to sit in before a judge at a hearing and say, not only am I his brother, but I'm his future employer. He'll have a job upon release. Most proud moment by a long stretch. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yep.
Second chances. That's a big deal.
Everyone deserves it.
Yeah.
Everyone deserves it. Yeah.
100%. One of my favorite clients that I've worked with before is Nehemiah Manufacturing.
Yeah, I
Richard
love
Palmer.
Eric and that group over there. They do wonderful work.
Exactly. And that's what it is. I loved telling their stories. It's one of my favorite things to tell.
They do a lot revolved around second chance hiring. I just had a conversation with some of their employees about Juneteenth.
Yeah.
A few weeks back, I went and talked to 2 groups, and they're just crushing it. Very proud to have them here in our city.
Yeah, and to be hiring so many people who have been incarcerated. I think that's huge.
Incredible.
And that's an awesome proud moment. You ready for the other hard question?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, take your coffee. Here we go.
Is this coffee or bourbon? What time is it?
We could supply you whatever you need.
I saw the bar out there.
Yeah, right? What keeps you up at night? I know you wake up happy and you're ready to go, but what keeps you up at night?
Yeah. Well, now I have, teammates who rely on me to win and rely on me to be a thought leader and rely on me to create new avenues for us to continue to scale and grow. I have teammates who pay their mortgages and their rent based off of that level of reliability and are raising their children off of that level of reliability. They're always at the front of my mind when I wake up, when I go to sleep, midday. So that's what keeps me up at night is this thought that, hey, we've got to continue to grow. We've got to continue to scale, not for the sake of the awards and the accolades, but for the sake of the people, right, who are betting with me, right, who are working hard to help us grow. My team is completely bought in, right?
That's half the battle right
completely
there.
Bought in.
Right.
Now I have to live up to the expectation that they have for me. Oftentimes we talk about the employer to employment expectation, right? I see it the other way. We've got to grow. They depend on me to get my rest. They depend on me to do that afternoon run when it's hot as hell outside and I've only got 15 minutes to do it, but I got to get it in. They depend on me to stay healthy. They depend on my mind to stay sharp. There's a dependency there. And when you love people the way I love people, that's what's always on my mind. So that would be it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Those were 2 tough ones. Thanks for answering them.
2 tough ones. And but necessary for you to evaluate, continue to evaluate. And those things shift. And I've learned to love the shifting of those things, right? Corporations shift philosophies all the time and shift goals all the time.
Yeah. be disruptive.
That's the reason why they do that.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing
Right.
should stay the same.
Right.
So I've embraced that, and it's been really beneficial.
That's awesome.
Yep.
You're awesome.
Thanks. I appreciate
Thanks
it.
for coming on.
I'm glad to be here.
Podcast. I'm so excited to have this time to sit down with you. Thanks for being vulnerable and transparent with us. And
yeah, I appreciate it. I wore my hat. My hair looks terrible.
No, you're representing.
I'm bald, by the way, guys. So
No,
just so
you're
you guys are aware.
representing the red hot Cincinnati Reds.
I am a big Reds fan. We are doing exceptionally well. Shout out to Phil and Karen and the whole front office over.
Oh my gosh,
the
Karen
Cincinnati
is.
Reds.
We sent her an email to see if she'd come on this podcast. Tell her it's not bad.
She needs to come.
It's easy, right?
She needs to come. But big Reds fan. Love what's going on in the state of the city with all sports teams. It's pretty incredible.
It's so cool,
right? What's going on?
Our kids, they have no idea, man. My son is growing up with Joe Burrow as the quarterback.
Yeah.
He gets to watch, we were at the game when Ellie De La Cruz had his cycle.
Yeah.
That kid has no idea what shit teams in
Oh,
Cincinnati
yeah, he has no clue.
Is.
He has no clue.
Because I'm telling you, we're riding a high,
Yeah.
but we've been through some woes.
Yeah. You got two names real quick that you just mentioned that brings this funny story. Let me tell you this before we leave.
No, yeah.
So I'm at the bank. It's about a month and a half ago when Cruz just got here, right? And it got called up. And it's that third game against, I believe, the Dodgers. And I had a meeting canceled. So I text Karen. I said, hey, are you around? I'm coming down to the ballpark. I got to see this kid. So I get down there. And, of course, in Karen fashion, she sends me a ticket. I get in the ballpark, get me a hot dog, get me a beer, sit down, mid-afternoon game.
Yeah.
And I get in my seat. And she goes, hey, where are you? So she comes to find me, and Phil and I are great friends as well. So she goes, come upstairs. Phil wants to say hi. No warning at all. So I get up to the suite, right? And I go up all the time, and I sit with Phil. He had his sons there and some of their friends. It's just a great family environment, and they're always very welcoming to me and my dad when we go to the games.
Yeah, that's great.
And I walk into the suite, and I'm fixated on Phil because I haven't seen him in a while. I give him a big bear hug. We talk for a second, and I look to my right, and pretty much right where this camera is Joe Burrow.
Oh my gosh. Stop
I'm like,
it.
pre-warning, anything, nothing, right? Whatever the case may be. And got a chance to introduce myself and told him I was a fan of the foundation and so forth.
Could you get words out of your mouth when you introduced yourself?
It was a pretty cool factor, right? And my favorite thing about Joe, outside of the big arm and the intelligence, is the fashion.
Yes.
The boy can flat out dress.
Yes, he
right?
can.
I don't know if someone's styling him or it's just all him.
It doesn't matter.
But he knows how to put some clothes on.
But he's so humble.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Is that real in real life? Because when
Very much
sorry, I have to compare him to other quarterbacks. I won't say the names, but there are some quarterbacks out there that I'm watching on that quarterback Netflix special, and I'm like, you are not humble.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
They could be a-holes from time to time,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it reflected in person, right? And, I'm guessing, but a lot of that probably comes from his upbringing. I mean, good parents, it seems like he has a mom and dad who just will not accept that, right?
Yeah.
And the work that he's doing with his foundation and in the city on top of being an excellent athlete is just absolutely incredible. So
No, I love it.
But it was just
That's
to
so
look to my
cool.
right, I got this hot dog with a sauerkraut on it,
Yeah.
right? Got my beer, sitting down into this low seat, and I just happened to look to my right, and I'm like, oh, this is what we're doing. Okay.
That's kind
It was
of
pretty
amazing.
cool. So shout out to my Cincinnati Reds. I love them to life.
I
and
love it.
Wish them much success. Yeah, it's going to be great.
I have to tell you one quick thing because, again, we're going to just have to keep talking because we're friends
Yeah.
now. But my husband, 45, adorable George Heron, we jokingly call him #poor George. The minivan out front with my license plate literally says Jess 1, like WN.
I love that, yeah.
Anyway. He was growing his hair out. He's got the mohawk. He and my son do it every summer. And he started wearing the headband with the flop. And then we see Joe Burrow, and all of our friends are like, George, you did it first.
You did it first.
Oh my gosh.
I love that.
George, you
I
are
love that.
before Joe
I love
Shiesty
that.
on the headband. So I'll have to send you a picture. It's kind of funny. Yeah.
The city's in a great point right
Oh
now,
my gosh.
right? We're
It's
embracing
fun.
entrepreneurship and creativity at an alarming rate in the most positive way. I say that in the most positive way. And then, doors are opening and we're being inclusive and we're doing the work. We got a ways to go, but we can't discount where we come from.
Are you
right?
proud?
I'm very proud. Right? And it's weird. It's hard for me to go on vacation these days. I love this city that much.
Yeah.
I love this city that much. I don't like being away from home. It's excellent.
No, we have so much here to offer everybody.
Totally. Yep.
Everybody.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was awesome. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to rediscover your own story, please connect with us at any of the links below. My name is Jessie Heron. Thanks for taking a break with me.